if I play the sound is being generated inside the synth in real time. It's not a recording of something, and if I play a sound, and I can turn these knobs and change the sound somehow, but that's not really doing much. So you can hear how that sound changes in real time, and all those things, kind of, the sound morphs as I'm turning knobs and stuff like that. And why that's happening is because everything is being generated right here. You can see everything that's happening inside the synth. So that's a synthesizer that's making the sound happen right there in front of us. Compare that to some kind of a sampler instrument, or something that's using samples, like Contact, for example. In Contact, if I pull up like a piano, for instance, let's pull up, I'll go down here and pull up here, one of these pianos here. Here's the Gentleman. In this piano here, if I play this piano, it's actually it's not generating the sound in real time. It's actually playing back samples that have been recorded and assigned to these keys. And that's really the main difference between a sampler and a synthesizer. You can record anything you want into a sampler, but you're actually recording sound. So you have to start with a sound that you've recorded. And that's what a sampler does. Whereas a synthesizer creates a sound in front of you, like right there as you're going. Now, that doesn't mean that some of the synth parameters can't be assigned to a sampler as well. So for example here, you can see on my screen, I've got a knob here for the color, and you can hear that change as I adjust that. And that's because there's some kind of like a filter or something going on in here, possibly. Right. And that changes the way the sound is. And you can still assign, like you can have, like Contact is all sampling. It's like everything is about samples in Contact. So if I go in here and I find a synth type of sound in here, we'll go in here and we'll go to the factory library and go into synth, and in here, if I get a synth lead, right, so that sound there, that's a very synthy type of sound. And it's got a filter here. And that filter is like a real filter from like a synthesizer or something like that, but it's assigning it onto the sampled sound. So they start with a synthesizer, they record that synthesizer in, and then they add a filter into it as well. So that's what's going on here with this. So even though it sounds like a synth, it's not a synth, it's a sample from a synth. And so that's a really key thing to keep in mind between the difference between samplers and synthesizers. So that's what's up there. And you got to make sure you keep that in your head. So let's get going with this. All right, let's go into these notes here. So basically, a sampler is a device that allows you to record audio and then assign it to keys or pads for musical playback. And that's the difference between a sampler and like a DAW. So a DAW, you can record stuff in, and I can go ahead and record in, like, I can drag and drop my different like beat loops and stuff like that into here. So for example, if I go over here to my dirty percussion, I can get some samples, and these are going to be not loops. Let's find some loops. Here we go. Okay, so here's some loops. All right, and this is a drum loop here. And this drum loop, I can play it back like this inside of Ableton Live. But when I do it like this inside of Ableton Live, the difference between this and a sampler is that a sampler, as we look here in the notes and we see this, is a device that allows you to record audio and then assign it to keys or pads for musical playback. So what this doing it here doesn't allow me to do is it doesn't allow me to like really play it back. It allows me to just kind of play it as a loop, which is usually going to be fine. But if I wanted to play it back and do some different stuff to it, I'd want to drag it into a sampler. And a sampler, if I pull up a sampler here, let's pull up the sampler, and the same exact drum loop, I'll just drag it into my sampler here. So now I've got this. All right, so there it is there, and I can play it. And if I play it up on different keys, you can hear how it's playing it differently. And here, let me just go ahead and show you that here. So if you see, here's my, there we go. Let's just align that. So you can see if I'm playing it, there's the normal key. And you can hear how it's going up in pitch, but it's also getting faster. And if I go down from here, it's going to get slower. And it's also going to get lower in pitch. And that's harder to do inside of Ableton Live. If I want to do that inside of Ableton Live itself with the loop, I can still do that because of warping, but I have to do it right here, and I can't play it like naturally. So that's the difference between a sampler and just your DAWs that you have these days, like Logic, Ableton Live, Pro Tools, is that when you assign with a sampler, you're assigning the audio to keys or pads for musical playback. So a couple of vocabulary words you need to know when you're dealing with samples, and this is really important, these words here. You got the sample start, which is the start point of the sample. You got the end, sample end, which is the end point of the sample. Then you got the root note, is the note that plays the sample at its original recording. So for example, if I'm going over here and let's just look at this real quick. I've got this here, my start point, if we look down here at the bottom of my screen, my start point is this little flag right here. Now, Ableton Live, the simpler in Ableton Live, this device that I'm using right now, doesn't really say the word start point and end point. It does have a start percentage here, and it has a length percentage, which is kind of the same, but not exactly the same. But these little flags here allow you to adjust where your start and your end is. So if I put my end point right here, if I hit play, it's going to stop right there. Right? If I move this back, it's going to move over to there. And if I move my start point forward, it's going to start playing the sample from here. So you can see how that works there. And almost all samplers these days have some kind of like a flag or like some kind of a marker for the start and the end points of the sample. Right? Now, talking about the root note, you can see here's my key on my keyboard here. This is my root note. When I play this note, the sample's going to play back at its original speed and its original pitch. So whatever it was recorded at, that's where it's going to be right here. So let's go ahead and drag another sample in real quick. Let's get some kind of, let's get these vocals here. There's the Sarah G vocals. And let's get a phrase.
Come on. Hey, hey. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so.
Break down the wall.
Okay. So let's use that. Yeah, got that one there. So we play it.
Break down the walls.
Okay. So that's her singing at the original pitch. And if I wanted to, I can adjust the start point of the sample. I can zoom in here and adjust the start point.
Break down the
And I can adjust some of my envelope here.
walls.
Right? So I've just taken this one word out of this phrase. And I can play that back. Now, if I wanted to play that at a higher pitch, I can go up my keyboard here. Right, but you can hear that as I go higher up in pitch, it becomes more chipmunky, and it plays faster. It gets really weird sounding. And if I go down low, it does the same thing.
Break down, break down, break down, break down, break down, break down the wall.
Right, sounds super weird and crazy sounding. And this is just how samplers work. This is the normal way that samplers work. So we can play this.
Break, 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 break.
Right, and what I'd want to do is I'd want to grab the beginning of this a little bit closer.
Break, 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 break.
Right, and you've all heard those old techno songs from the 90s probably, where it's like,
Break, 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 break.
right? And that's just somebody playing a sampler like this. That's how that works. And that's fine, but it's also super, super 90s, and it's very old school sounding. So if you wanted to recreate like Mortal Kombat, like that, that's, what you would do. You use a sampler for this kind of stuff. But the modern way that we can do this nowadays, samplers are a little bit more technologically advanced, and we can do a lot more with them, and we're going to get into that, talking about warping and stuff like that. But these are all modern sampler techniques, so we're not going to go there quite yet. So this is the basics of sampling, and this is in case you're wondering, this is the Ableton Live Push here. I finally got a plug for it, so now it can be brighter, so you can actually see it on the screen here. And you can see in here, if we look at this, here, let me make that bigger. There you go, so you can see it up here. And the left-hand corner, like up across the top here, you can see I've got my start and my end right here. So if I move this, I can adjust the start point. This is one of the cool things about the Live Push, is that it allows you to control live with hardware very, very easily. It's actually designed to work in conjunction with live. So I can adjust. Here, let me just move these around. Let me see. I'm trying to get my hand out of the way here. So here we can see I can adjust the end point of my sample, and I can adjust the start point of my sample. So if I play this, right? And that's bending that sound around. And this is actually something that people have been using in more modern tracks up to about 2012 or 2013 or so. You'd hear a lot of people using just like a snippet from a vocal or something like that, and kind of bending it and doing some stuff like that, which we will get into. But here I've got the loop point, the start point and stuff, so I could adjust this. I can go back. So you can do all sorts of stuff like that. And this is something that you couldn't do if I just drag this phrase into Ableton Live. I can't really
break down the wall.
Can't really do anything with it like that. I can't really adjust it.
Break down the wall.
I can adjust the start point. I'm going to turn the warp off there for a second, but if you look here on my screen, zoom in for you, and I can adjust my start point here, but that's not going to allow me to play it.
Down the wall.
It's just going to allow me to play the sample like from that point.
Wall. Break down the.
Right? I can't really trigger it like I can. I can't adjust the pitch like that. I'm not playing it. I'm just kind of making it start and stop, but I'm not actually like playing it like musically. So that's the real big difference there. Go back in here. So we have the sample start, the sample end. The root note plays the original sample at its original recording, and we can adjust that. I'm going to show you how to do that later. Then we have key zones. And the key zones are for some of the more powerful sampling instruments, and they allow you to assign the sample to specific keys. You get your low key and your high key. Now, for those of you who are using the demo version of Ableton Live, the demo version of Ableton Live is Live Suite. It's like the full-on, full-featured version of Ableton Live. It's like everything. It's like the kind of beefed up, souped up version. And that has an instrument here called Sampler. If I drag Sampler in, Sampler does have these key zones. So for example, if I drag this sample into here, so I've got this, and now,
Break down the wall.
so I've got this here. If I wanted to take this one, I can put this on a certain key zone. If I open up this right here, you can see this, and I'll go over how to do this in more detail later. I'm just going to show you something real quick. Here's my key zones, and then what I can do is I can go in here and I can say, all right, I want this vocal sample to play on this one key. Just go ahead and. So if I play these other keys, you can see my little, right here on my screen, you can see these little red dots here on the piano keyboard are showing where other keys that I'm playing. Right? But it's not playing the sample unless I play that one specific key. And that's because I have my key zone set. The key zone assigns the sample to specific keys. All right, it assigns the sample to specific keys. So we have the low key and the high key. The low key is the start of the key zone, and the high key is the end of the key zone. So for example, in this case here, my key zone would go from C3 to C3, because it's just the one key. But if I wanted to have it be on all these keys right here, so now I've got it right there, so. But it's not on this key here. If I go to this key, it's not on here, it's not on these keys, it's not down here as well. Right, so I've got on those keys there. What I could do is I could assign another sample. We can assign another sample from the same singer. Okay, so I got that there. I'm going to take this beautiful here. I'm going to drag this in here as well. Boop, drop it right there. And now you can see I can adjust my key zone here. So I can have this on a different group of samples, on a different group of keys, like this. Now, one thing you'll notice with this is this root note, the R, is showing me where my root note is. So the root notes are on the same keys in both of these samples. So if I play this one, we've got our original sample, but if I go up here, it's saying the new one, Beautiful World, but it's saying it really high up because the root note is way down here, so it's actually playing it an octave higher. So I want to go over here and adjust my root note. You can see in the lower left-hand corner down here, it says root. So I'm just going to take this and I'm going to go up an octave with it. There we go. Right, so there we go. So I can go ahead and I can play one from this one, and I can play this one over here. And I've got them in the same instrument. And that's what we call multi-sampling, and we're using key zones to do that. So that's the key zone here. All right, we got the low key, the high key. So the key zone really just assigns the sample to specific keys on the keyboard. Along with that, we've got the velocity zone. The velocity zone is the same thing as the key zone, but it's for velocities, how hard or soft you're playing the note. So the velocity zone assigns the sample to specific velocities. So for example, if I want to set it up so that these are all across the same key zones, just drag this out and assign my root to C3. Fine. Go ahead and drag this up. Okay. So I've got this here, so if I play it, it's going to play both of them at the same time. Well, this is super weird. But what I can do is I can assign my velocity zone here. So when I play it soft, it plays one, and when I play it hard, it plays the other one. So I'll just go ahead and set this up. So it plays this one when I play it like this, and this one when I play it like this. Oh, wait, okay, I'll turn it on. So you can see this line right here. This line is how hard I'm hitting my key, how hard I'm hitting the pad on my push here. So if I hit it harder, it's going to be over here at 127. If I play it softer, it's going to be over here. And that's just MIDI stuff, if you remember your MIDI lesson. So that's just velocity, how hard or soft I'm hitting the key. And what I've got is I've got it assigned to play different samples. So and you can see, here, let me just pull this up here. I'm playing the same key for both of them. Right, so you can see it's playing exactly the same one. I can play it lower. I'm just hitting it harder or softer. And that's hard to see when I'm playing down from above, when I've got the camera up here and it's going down here. It's hard to see how hard I'm hitting it, but you get the idea here. In a live setting, it's a bit tricky to display here. All right. So all these that we've just been talking about, the key zones and the velocity zones, having multiple samples in here, you can see here I've got two different samples in here. I've got this one, I've got this one. This is what we call multi-sampling. Multi-sampling enables multiple samples to be used within one instrument, and it's used to help sampled acoustic instruments sound more natural. You can also use it to set up drum machines and things like that. But usually it's used to kind of help acoustic instruments sound really natural. And what I mean by that is, if I take a piano sample, let's go in here, my samples here, I'm just going to grab a piano. And here's this piano right here. Right, so I'm just going to take this piano. This is, let's say, okay, let's use this one here. This one's C3. So I'm just going to take this, I'm going to throw it into my simpler instrument. So I'm going to go ahead and grab simpler from my instruments over here on the left. Go back down to my results and grab, where was that? piano C3, right here. So I'm just going to grab this and drag it down, and if I play this across the whole keyboard, it's going to start to sound really weird, because remember what we were doing before with my vocal. If I play it up an octave, it sounds really strange, and if I play it down an octave, it sounds really strange. If I play it right around the root note, it sounds okay, but here, check this out. So this is the root note of this, C3, and if I go up, it still sounds okay, but let me keep going. Hear how thin and weak that sounds? That does not sound nearly as good as this one. Right, that one sounds good. That one does not sound great. Same thing if I go down an octave. It doesn't sound real. Right. It only sounds really good right around in here. Right? But if I grab that piano sample, here, let's go ahead and delete this part here. And let's go ahead and make a multi-sample real quick. So I'm going to use the sampler instrument instead of the simpler instrument, because the difference between these two, one of the big differences is sampler is multi-timbral and simpler is not multi-timbral. So I've got this here, and let me just move, here, let's go put that like that. And I'm going to drag in, go back to my samples here, and let's grab, here, we'll go over here to these grand piano samples, and you can see, if I zoom in on this for you, you can see these all have note letter names and then numbers, letters and numbers here. And what this is showing me which key this is supposed to go on and which octave. So the number is the octave, the key, the A sharp, sharp is the black keys and the white keys. And then over here is forte, fortissimo, mezzo forte, piano. These are for the velocity levels. So how hard or soft you play the note. So for example, if I grab this, I'm not going to do too much with this. I'm just going to do a little bit. So I'm going to pull up my zones here. And let's grab the A0 here. And what I'm going to do is it automatically puts it onto the right key right here. If I play that, let's see, where are we? Down here. Boop, 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 octave down. And I'm going to put this on A and like A sharp. I'm going to move it across these keys like this, so it's on a couple of these keys. Well, that's super loud. Hold on, that was distorted crap. There we go. Okay, so there's my, not sure why that went up to 24 dB. Right? So we can see here, let me just put my scale into chromatic. There we go. There's the root note there. And if I play up on my keyboard here, let me go ahead and just show you the keyboard. Right there, we can see it's not playing it on those other notes. And it's only playing it right there, these three notes here. So if I want to have more sound, let's go here to grab the B. Do we have B? Where we have A0. Here we're going to grab the A here, this one, drag it in. I'll grab the mezzo forte one for this one. And put that across these notes like this. Are there any other zero keys? I don't see. Oh, here we go. Here's E0. Yeah, G0. There's C0. You got to find the right octave for all of these as well. There we go. There's C. C sharp 0. Okay, so I'll drag this one in. Oh wait, no, we want C sharp. We want C1. There we go. And so what I do is I put these together like this. So it makes up my whole keyboard. Like here, so here's that, and then D sharp 1. Put that in here. And what's the next one up from this? Would be F sharp 1. And you can see I'm using all my MF ones, the mezzo forte ones. A1. And then C2. And you can see, I can go in here like this and make these adjustments. And you can see how that takes a while to do that. It's not super quick. But if I go ahead and play this, I can play the scale. Ah, goodness, sorry. For some reason, it's bringing them all in at plus 24 dB. Or I'm not sure why. That's super annoying. There we go, put those down. There we go. Cool. All right, so if I play up the octave, and you can hear that sounds more natural. Put that back into key. And that's how the sounds sound natural, because people are making a multi-timbral instrument using multi-samples. Not multi-timbral, sorry, they're using multi-samples to make it sound more natural. And that's a really important thing. If you want to do sampling and you want to sample properly, then you've got to spend time making multi-samples. And you might say, wow, that takes a long time. And I would say, yeah, it does take a long time. There is software to help make these instruments. It goes faster, and especially if you're using synthesizers that can accept MIDI, you can make samplers a lot more. You can make instruments a lot more quickly. But if you're sampling like real sounds and you're making your instruments like that, then it is going to be time-consuming. It's going to take time, and you're just going to have to sit down and do the work. There's not like an easy out for it. And there's a lot of really cool stuff out there. So for example, samplers are quite complex now. So let me go ahead and get rid of this thing here. Let's pull up Contact. Contact is pretty much the industry standard. And it's not the only sampler out there. But Native Instruments have done a really good job of establishing it as kind of a sampler engine that a lot of people use for a lot of different things. So for example, you do have piano sounds. Let's grab this one here and throw it in. So this is called Alicia's Keys. It's basically they went to the studio and sampled her piano and put it in here. And we're not going to spend a lot of time on Contact right now. We're going to come back and talk about that on a different day. But they've got all these samples in here, and it's got this great sound. And you can hear that it sounds beautiful. It's a really nice piano sound. If we look under the hood, I'm going to click this little button right here, this wrench. If I look under the hood here, you can see all the mapping that goes on in here. These are all individual samples, and these aren't even all the samples that are used inside this instrument. But you can see here there's just a ton of things. Now you'll notice that this one looks very different from what we were just looking at in the Ableton sampler. And that's because every sampler is built a bit differently. There's lots of different companies that make samplers, and we're going to talk about the history of sampling in just a minute here. But essentially, everyone's going to look different, so you have to kind of learn how to use them if you want to use different samplers, if you want to make stuff for different instruments, different samplers. This one here is, you've got your key range across the bottom, so you can see these are all notes on one key here. And then the velocity range goes up like this. So all these blue boxes are one sample each. And so you can see this has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 different velocity zones on each key. And then it's like a lot of keys. It looks like 88 keys going across the bottom there. That's a ton of samples. And they just went in and they just recorded her piano, somebody playing it or something, one note at a time. It's incredible. It's a lot of work. And this isn't even all of the samples they've got in here. There's a lot of other sounds going on. So you can see in here, they've got like effect sounds, they've got like the resonance, and they've got different like all this different stuff that's in here just to make it sound more realistic. And you can open the hood of open the lid of the piano and close the lid, and all these different things. You can go in here and you can see pedal sounds and stuff like that. And they had to sample all those different sounds. All right, so it's a lot of work that goes into these things. So if you want to get into this, if you want to get into making samples like this kind of stuff, there's going to be a lot of work going on. Not to say that to use samples you have to do this much work, because you don't. You can do there's a lot of ways to use samples. This is just one way to make instruments. But this is just also one instrument. There's another Contact also comes with like these instruments like Cuba, for example. And so we can go in here and we can say, okay, I want to play solo conga. And what I can do is I can go down here and play. What I'm doing is, if you look down across the bottom of the screen down here, you can see over here, I'll just zoom in, you can see I'm playing these keys right here. And what these keys are doing is they are playing individual samples. So this has a kind of a sequencer built into it. You can see the sequence right here. Here's my sequencer. And so when I play it, it's going to play that sequence. And you can actually program your own notes in here, and you can and that's pretty dope, and that's something that a lot of sampler instruments don't really do, is that kind of stuff. And this is why Contact is really used a lot, because you can get really, really deep with this stuff and you can do all sorts of crazy, crazy things with it. Do you have to? No, you don't have to, but you can. It's there if you want to do it. And it's also really helpful, for example, like I don't know how to play congas. I love the sound of like Cuban instruments and all these like world instruments, but I don't know how to play them. But here I can go ahead and I can program stuff in, and I've got these great sounds, and I can just like go through and find the different patterns that they have. So I can go to this one here, browser, and I can find different ones. I can say cumbia. Different rhythms that they've programmed in, which is pretty cool. So you can do some really neat stuff, and if you know how to program stuff in, or if you want to get into programming stuff in, you can do that and go ahead and program your own rhythms and stuff into it. So that's another thing that you can use with a powerful sampler like Contact. All right. So once you've got multiple samples, let me just go ahead real quick and let's go ahead back to the one that comes with Ableton Live Suite. And I'm just going to go ahead and create like a little drum kit. And this is another way that we can use samplers is to create drum kits. So I'm going to go over here to my drums and go to my drum hits, and I'll just make a little drum a drum kit with some different drums on it. So I've got in here, I've got here, let's go ahead and go to 909. So here's this one here. I'll drag this in like this. And what I'll do is I'll put these on different key zones. So here, I've got this key zone here. Let's go ahead and adjust the key zone here. So I'm just going to have, when you're making drum kits, you generally just want to have your notes play on one key. So now, let's see, where are we? There we go. Okay, so that's just playing on one key right here. You can see here we got different pages we can mess around with stuff in here. Let's go ahead back to the sample part. Okay, so what I'm going to do is we can load that into the RAM right there. I'm going to go ahead and grab, let's go to filter global. So here's my envelope here. I'm going to just turn my release up so it's all the way up. This one, I don't use this one very much, so I don't see, it usually has something called one shot, but I don't see the one shot mode in here right now. So I'm just going to make it so it just plays through until the end using my envelope here. So now that whole thing plays, and I'm going to turn the volume up a little bit so y'all can hear that better. So I've got that right there. I've got that kick drum sound, and now let's go over here and get a snare drum sound. Drag that one in there and put that there. I'm going to move that over to this note here. And when you're doing this, let's make sure that we are setting the root note to the right pitch. And you can see that little R right there is not the right pitch. So we're going to set the R to be D. Alright, so I got that there. And let's go ahead and put a hi-hat in there as well. I'm going to stick a hi-hat here. Let's get the open and the closed hi-hat. There we go. I'm going to put these hi-hats right there, one of them, and the other one is going to go right here. And again, this does take time. And I'm putting them in weird places. You can see I'm not just dragging them in here in any old place, and that's because when you're setting these drum kits up, there's kind of a basic way to set these things up. And the reason why they've set up kind of a standard for setting these up is because they wanted to make it so when you change your drum kits, the same drum sounds were on the same keys. So like a kick drum is always on C, and a snare drum is usually on D, and your hi-hats are usually on F sharp, G sharp, and A sharp. You got your side stick, which is usually on C sharp. Things like this. And that just makes it so you can flip through your different drum kits, and it's always going to be a kick. It's going to be a different sounding kick, but it's always going to be a kick right there. So if I go over here to my rim sound, let's use this one here. Drag this, I'll put this right there, and I'm going to move this over to here. And once you've played with enough drum kits, you'll kind of learn what those are. What keys they're supposed to go into. Let's go ahead and get this hand clap on here. Put that right there. And again, just messing with my root note here. Yep. You know. Right. So we've got that there. Now I can program in a beat. Just go ahead and do that. Let's just put that there. Boom. Like that. And we'll put my hand clap right there and get that offbeat hi-hat going here. Now, if you've been messing around with the drum kits in Ableton Live, you'll notice this isn't really quite as easy as programming in something on the drum rack. It doesn't have the sample names over here on the left-hand side. It's just a normal keyboard. And you would be right. It's not nearly as easy to do it like this as it would be to do a normal drum rack in Ableton Live. But you can do it. I'm just kind of showing you how you can do it, not that you should do it like this. Velocity turn off any of these. So there you go. There's like a basic drum kit going on here, and you can see all of these are on their own individual notes here. Right. Okay, so there we go, and that's another thing that you can use these multi-samples for, is kind of creating drum kits and stuff like that. All right. So if I wanted to, how can you tell which key each instrument has to be in? You have to, so if you're working with like keyboard samples and stuff like that, if you're sampling your own sounds, then if that's what are you talking about, how can you tell which note, like are you talking about the drum kits? Like this one has to be the kick, and this one has to be the snare, and this one has to be the hi-hat. Is that what you're talking about there, Damien? So there's two answers to a question like this. One answer is that if you're asking how, yeah, okay, so you're asking about how do I know which is the kick and which is the snare, and that just comes, it literally just comes from me doing this for years and years and years, looking at how they've made drum kits and stuff. But if we go over here and we drag in, here, let's open up, I'm going to open up Contact, and I'll show you what I mean by this. If we go in here to Contact here, and we open up any drum kit in Contact, it's going to be the same layout. And I just know it from doing it over and over again. I guess it's probably written down somewhere. I don't know where that would be. So I'm going to open up this kit that's called Abbey Road 50s Drummer Light, Autumn Light, okay? And so this drum kit here, whoa, you're loud. Hold on, turn you down. And let's find an octave. There we go. All right, and this one is, you can see where the different drum samples are on here. Let me go ahead and pull this keyboard up. And if I play this one here, let's see. That's a little bit soft. Across the bottom of my screen down here in Contact, you can see it has this like colored keyboard here. And this one shows you where different samples are. And if I pull up a different drum kit, let's go over here and grab a completely different drum kit. I guess, let's see. There's like studio drums down here somewhere. Studio Drummer. So here we'll pull up Studio Drummer, Garage Kit Lite. And I pulled up this, and I play these. And we look at this screen, because I don't have a keyboard we can look at easily right here, but I'm playing the same exact keys. Now, I'm a very bad finger drummer, is what they call it when you're playing with your hands. It's called finger drumming. I'm really bad at it. Some people are amazing at it. If you look up some YouTube videos of like finger drumming, I'm sure you're going to find some pretty amazing stuff out there. But my point is that you just know which key has the drums on it from just looking at how people would program these drums. And this is something that was set up back in the 80s, and they've just been using it ever since. So it's a really good idea to keep your samples on the correct keys because when you're changing through your different kits, it's going to always have the right, like the kick drum will be correct here, and then the snare drum will be here, and then the hi-hat will be here. And you really want to have it kind of be like that. You really want to have that set up like that. So I just know it from just doing it over and over again, but I'm sure it's written down somewhere on the internet, and if not, maybe. Well, yeah, I could. You know what? I should probably set it up and do it for y'all. So now all those drum sounds in the same kit are going to be in groups, and groups allow you to adjust parameters of multiple samples all at the same time. So, example, for your output, or if you have a filter on one drum kit, or if you wanted to put like a distortion on one drum kit and not have a distortion on a different drum kit, if you have like 5 different drum kits set up in the same instrument, then you can put those in groups. I could have drum kit number 1 be in a group, and drum kit number 2 be in a group, and drum kit number 3 be in a group. And then I could adjust the parameter for those samples at the same time. And we're going to come back and talk about that when we talk about Contact in depth. Then you've got tuning, and tuning allows you to adjust the pitch or the speed of the sample in semitones. That's here. If we go back over here to our phrases, we've got this phrase here. I'm going to go ahead and put these on keys instead of velocities, because velocities is kind of hard to navigate. So I'm going to put this one on this key here. And I'm going to put this one on this key here. So it's still a multi-sample, but it's just not a very complicated multi-sample. Now, one thing I want you to notice about this is if I'm playing my keys on my keyboard, or if we go over here, let me just show you this one here. if I'm playing keys on the keyboard here, and you're not hearing anything, and this is something that a lot of people have problems with in the beginning, especially when you're dealing with drums. They'll say, Tony, I can't hear my drums. I can't hear the samples. Why? Like, nothing's happening. Why is nothing happening? And that's because you're playing the wrong octave on your keyboard. Every single keyboard has an octave key right here. Well, it's in a different place. It's not always right here, but there's always an octave key on every single keyboard or controller or something. There's always an octave key. So here, I should be playing, it seems like I should be playing the right sample, but it's not. So I hit the octave key. Now you can see it is in the right octave. So, but if I was playing it down here, I wouldn't be hearing anything. So if you're getting to a point where you're like you loaded up a drum kit and you're not hearing anything and you're trying to hear stuff, well, make sure that you've got the correct octave. And the only way you can do that is by hitting. Well, there's two ways. In Ableton Live, you can actually see where the notes are being played. So I can see here, right here, I'm in the wrong octave, so I just move up, and now I'm in the right octave. Right? So make sure you're in the correct octave. You can use the octave keys, or you can just play a different place on your keyboard. If I wanted to adjust the tuning of these, so I go in here and I say, okay, all phrases. So down here on the left, it says detune, or it says, that's probably not going to be. Yeah, that's just detuning. Hold on, let's get the real tuning of this one is where? Pan, tag, sustain, pitch, voices, pitch, here we go, pitch. Yep, here we go. So under this tab that says pitch, over here, this one says transpose. So right, so that's for the whole instrument. There should be one here for our samples. They have it set up in kind of a weird way, and we're going to talk about this. I don't really use, like I said, I don't really use this sampler, the instrument that comes with Ableton Live too much, because it's a little bit, it's not amazing the way it works. And actually here, let me show you this in a different instrument here. Let's go ahead and pull up the simpler instrument here. And I'm going to drag this sample into the simpler instrument. There we go. So this one here is actually a little bit more normal, like Contact or something. The only problem with this one is you can't use multi-samples with this. But I've got this.
Break down the wall.
Okay, so I've got this here. What I'm going to do, go to my controls, and I can turn my transposition right here. So there we go. So with this one, you can see there's a transposition here. With this one though, what you're missing with this is it doesn't have it doesn't have a root key because it's not multi-samples. So every sample just starts on C3 as its kind of root note. When we get into Contact, you're going to see that more clearly, what I mean by all that stuff. So we're going to come back to this again in Contact, and we're going to be talking about these terms all week long. Okay. Now you've also got this thing in here called loop. Loop repeats an entire sample or a portion of it. So for example, I have this part right here.
Break down the wall.
If I want to loop this, I can turn my loop on right here. And the loop, I can start the loop at a point like this, and I can adjust my loop length. Sorry, not that. Right here.
Break down the wall.
Let's move that, or like this. There we go.
Break down the wall.
And if I hold this down forever, that note would just continue to be held. Now, live, this simpler instrument does it really, really weird. It's kind of a strange way to deal with your loops. I don't really like it very much because it is so strange. But let's go over here and look at the sampler instrument, which is the kind of older brother, or older sibling rather. So in here, we can have our loop here. Let's see, sustain mode. There we go. Turn the loop on with the sustain mode button right here. And we're going to go over here to my loop, and we're going to adjust the loop. There we go. There we go. So we can have this, and you can hear that it's not very smooth, but let's just deal with it here for a second. Right? The reason why it's not very smooth is because this is not a great sample to loop. It doesn't have a long sustained part. It's fine for like this kind of weird sound, or if you want to do something weird with this voice here, but it's not going to be a very like smooth loop here. But you can hear, you can do some really cool stuff with it. So if we throw a drum beat in here, let's go ahead and make a new track here. And let's put a drum loop in here. So we'll go over here to our sample. Let's go to Sample Magic and grab this one here. Alright, so let's drag this one in here like this. Whoops, not MIDI. I'm going to put a sampler instrument in here. And the reason why I'm using sampler again is because that's the one that you'll have access to most readily. So we can see in here, here is the sample. And if I wanted to, I can grab my loop and drag it over and zoom in, and I can adjust my loop so it'll loop that drum beat. You can see there it goes. Right? And if I play it on any pitch, it's still going to loop it like that. And that's what your loop can do. Now, your loop doesn't have to loop the whole sample, as you heard before with the female vocalist. I can loop just part of this. Let's just loop like this last part here. I can loop that, or I could go over here and I could loop some kind of like really small part of it. I can start to loop anywhere I want within everything, and it doesn't have to be in tempo. You hear how that one's kind of off tempo a little bit. I can move this over. It gets kind of weird. So you want to make sure that your loops are in rhythm, that they sound good. And that usually takes a while to do it, especially in these kind of more older samplers. And I'm going to show you some cool tricks in Kontakt later on when we dive deeper into Kontakt here. But that's your loop and your loop start, your loop end, all that stuff there. The loop start just is the beginning of the loop, the loop end is the end of the loop. It's all pretty self-explanatory stuff there. So this is just showing us in the notes here a little illustration of how these key zones work. The key zones shows you which assigned keys you are on the keyboard. So for example, if I have a single zone sample, it's just on one single note, there it is, it's assigned to one key, which would be like C3. And the low key would be C3, and the high key would also be C3. If I have a sample that's assigned to multiple samples, I've got the low key here, would be like E3, and the high key would be like G sharp 3. So you're seeing your low key on the one side and your high key on the other side. Then I have here my root note. Within a key zone, the root note is which key is playing the sample back at its original pitch and speed. But note that the root note does not have to be inside the key zones. Then we also have our velocity zones. The velocity zones is like how hard I hit the key on the keyboard. If I hit it soft, it's going to play these green zone down here, and if I hit it hard, it would play the red or the blue zones. So in this case here, we can see we've got the key zone is going across the different keys, left and right, from left to right. And then the velocity zone is going from how hard I hit the key, it's up and down. And then you have your groups. Using groups means I don't have to assign samples one-to-one to an output. So for example, if I have two groups here and I have multiple outputs on the back of my sampler like hardware, if I wanted to do some different mixing or whatever, I can have group 1 all go out to outputs 3 and 4, and group 2 I'll go out to outputs 5 and 6. And this is a real world example of the sampler that I used to have back in the day. 3 and 4, I had 8 outputs on the back of my sampler, so I had it going into the inputs on my mixer, and then I would have like this drum kit, or these drums would go to 3 and 4, these drums would go to 5 and 6, these drums would go to 7 and 8. So I could mix them together better. I could, have my kick drum be on output 3 and my snare drum be on output 4, and then my toms or my hi-hats be on 5 and 6, and my toms be on 7 and 8. And I could set up my drum kits like that so I could have recording them easier, or having them go to compressors or EQs or stuff like that. So groups are really useful. I don't use them so much anymore just because I produce music a bit differently than how I used to. And then the loops, here's our start point, or our sample end point over here, and the loop would have its own sample, our own start and end point here, and it would loop the section in the middle of it. Keep in mind that the loop start and end points do not have to be the same as the sample start and end points. They do not have to be the same things. All right, cool. So let's go ahead and pause right there. And what we're going to do is we're going to come back and we're going to back up a little bit and talk about the kind of the history of samplers. And then we're going to talk a little bit, we're going to dive a little bit deeper into Kontakt here. So we're going to go ahead and pause. Let's take a break. Let's take a 15-minute break and be back at 11:10. All right. And I'm going to be playing some music here in the background. And this music that I'm playing is a band called The Orb, and it's all samples. They don't use any synthesizers. This is like from their album back in 1991, I believe, or 91, something like that. And it's just a deep dive into lots and lots of cool samples and stuff like that. So I'm going to play this. It's pretty chill music. So enjoy that, and I'll see you on the flip side of the break. Thanks.